It was supposed to be the most perfect day of her life. Amara had dreamed about this moment since childhood, a glamorous baby shower in a prestigious neighborhood, surrounded by family, friends, and everything money could buy. The estate was transformed into a wonderland of pastel colors and twinkling lights. Champagne flowed freely, while guests mingled beneath hand-strung flower arrangements. Amara glowed with the confidence of a woman who had an successful career, the handsome husband, the healthy pregnancy, and the admiration of everyone around her. She stood in the center of the elegantly decorated garden, one hand cradling her swollen belly, the other holding a glass of sparkling juice. This was her moment. This was her triumph. She had no idea that everything was about to change. Diana, Amara's best friend, had planned every detail to perfection. The food was exquisite, imported delicacies arranged on marble platters. The gifts were piling up: designer baby clothes, luxury strollers, Italian cribs. Everyone was laughing, sharing stories, taking photographs for their social media. Their energy was electric with celebration. Amara's mother-in-law, Mama Grace, sat quietly to one side, watching with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She had lived 73 years and learned that joy without humility often invited the attention of jealous spirits. But when she tried to catch Amara's attention, her daughter-in-law was too busy laughing with her fashionable friends to notice the warning in her mother-in-law's gaze. These young women didn't believe in the old ways anymore. They believed in their own invincibility. Around 3 o'clock, the sky began to change. It happened gradually. At first, a darkening of the clouds that made Diana glance upward with concern. But then the guests rationalized it away. Clouds move, they said. The weather forecasts promised sunshine. It was just a passing shadow. Amara continued celebrating, opening more gifts, laughing louder. But Mama Grace stood up slowly, her old joints creaking with the weight of years. She moved to the edge of the garden and looked toward the iron gate. Something in her spirit was uneasy. In her 73 years, she had learned to trust this feeling and never lied. It was always a signal that something unseen was approaching. She closed her eyes briefly and whispered a prayer in her mother tongue, a prayer for protection, for wisdom, for mercy. The iron gate at the far end of the property creaked open slowly. At first, no one noticed. The music was loud, the conversation louder, but Mama Grace heard it immediately. Her sharp ears, honed by decades of listening to the world's subtle signals, caught the sound instantly. She turned her body fully toward the gate, and that's when she saw her, an old woman, impossibly old, walking slowly but with absolute purpose down the garden path. Her clothing was tattered, her feet bare and weathered, her hair white and uncombed. She moved like she didn't care about her appearance because she was there for something far more important than vanity. The old woman's eyes were the most striking feature. They burned with knowledge and power. Mama Grace felt her breath catch. She knew without being told that this was no accident. This old woman had come here deliberately. The music faded as more guests turned to stare at the unexpected visitor. An old, poor-looking woman walking through their exclusive neighborhood, through their private party, without invitation. Diana's smile froze on her face. Some of the guests began to whisper, their eyes narrow with judgment. Who was this woman? How did she get past the security gate? Why was she here? But the old woman ignored every questioning look. She walked with the confidence of someone who didn't need permission to go where she needed to go. She moved directly toward Amara, her ancient eyes locked onto the pregnant woman with an intensity that made several guests actually step back. Mama Grace moved quickly, positioning herself slightly forward, her maternal instinct ready to intervene if this strange woman posed any threat. But the old woman raised one weathered hand in a gesture of peace. She meant no harm, but she did mean something. When the old woman reached Amara, she stopped just inches away, her weathered face studying the younger woman with penetrating intensity. The old woman's voice, when she finally spoke, was raspy but clear, carrying the weight of decades of speaking truth. Child, she began, I see your glory, I see your confidence. I see a woman who believes she has built her own kingdom and that nothing can shake it. Amara tried to step back, but something in those ancient eyes held her frozen. But I have walked this earth for 87 years, and I have learned that the loudest celebrations often precede the deepest falls. Your joy is built on sand, not stone. And there is one among those you love most, someone you trust with your very life, who will betray you in ways you cannot imagine for a moment. The entire garden went silent. Every guest froze, uncertain whether they had heard correctly. Then Diana laughed, a sharp, nervous laugh that broke the tension. Is this some kind of joke? Did someone hire an actress to scare us? Other guests joined in, their laughter growing louder as they tried to regain the comfort of their celebration. It was easier to mock than to consider that this old woman might be speaking something true. But Mama Grace didn't laugh. Her face had gone pale, and she reached out to touch Amara's arm protectively. The old woman looked around at the mocking faces with neither anger nor surprise. She had seen this reaction countless times. People don't want to believe uncomfortable truths. They prefer the comfort of their delusions. You can laugh now, the old woman said calmly, but in 7 months, You will remember these words, and you will weep. Amara found her voice then, her confidence returning like armor. Who are you? How did you get in here? What do you want? The questions came rapidly, each one a defense against the fear she felt creeping into her chest. The old woman looked at her with something that might have been pitied. My name is Zainab. I live in the village beyond these walls, in the place you're kind of forgotten. I came because I was told in a dream to come. I was told to speak to a pregnant woman who has closed her ears to wisdom, who told her that pride comes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. Zainab turned slowly, looking at each face in the crowd. The one who will betray her is in this garden. The one she loves most. The one she trusts completely. And when the betrayal comes, it will not be a small thing. It will reshape her entire world. Diana, having recovered from her shock, signaled to security. 2 uniformed officers appeared from the side of the property. Their presence meant to reassert control and order. Ma'am, you're trespassing. You need to leave immediately, one of them said, his hand on Zainab's arm. But as he touched her, something seemed to pass between them. The security guard's face went pale, and he quickly released her arm as if burned. His colleague noticed his reaction and also stepped back. Zainab didn't resist. She turned to leave, as calmly as she had arrived. But before she did, she looked back one final time at Amara. 7 months, she said. The child will arrive, and with the child will come truth. The walls will crumble, and you will understand that the greatest wealth is not in your money or your business, but in the hearts of those who love you truly. Guard that, because it is the only thing that matters. As Zainab walked slowly back toward the gate, Dinah immediately tried to restore the party atmosphere. Well, that was certainly interesting, she said with forced brightness. But come on, everyone. Let's not let some crazy old woman ruin our celebration. The food is getting cold. Guests laughed, some genuinely relieved, others nervous. The music resumed. Fresh drinks were poured. But the energy of the celebration had fundamentally shifted. Amara stood in the center of the garden, one hand cradling her belly, her mind swirling with the old woman's words. James, her husband, who had been inside during the incident, came out to see what the commotion was. When Amara tried to tell him what happened, he shook his head. It's probably just someone confused, looking for something. Don't let it upset you. Stress isn't good for the baby. But Mama Grace said nothing. She simply held her hand and waited. She knew that Zanabi's words would take root, and they would grow until they became truth. That night, in the quiet of their bedroom, Amara couldn't sleep. She lay beside James, listening to his steady breathing, and found herself studying his face in the darkness. Could it be him? Could the man she loved be the one who would betray her? No, impossible. She pushed the thought away. Then she thought of her business partner, David, who had been at the party. They had built their company together over 5 years. Could he be the betrayer? Or perhaps her closest friend, Diana? The old woman's words had planted seeds of doubt that were beginning to grow in the darkness of the night. Every person she loved suddenly became a possibility, a potential threat. Amara got out of bed and stood at the window, looking out at the city lights below. 7 months, she whispered to herself. The number seemed enormous and also impossibly far away. How could she live for 7 months not knowing which of these people she trusted would eventually hurt her? The next morning, Mama Grace came. To visit, she found Amara in the kitchen, making breakfast, moving with less grace than usual. You didn't sleep, Mama Grace said. It wasn't a question. Her old eyes saw everything. Amara tried to deny it, but her mother-in-law sat down at the table and waited. Finally, Amara broke. Do you believe what that woman said? Do you really think someone I love is going to betray me? Mama Grace was quiet for a long time, her weathered hands folded on the table. I believe that woman was sent to tell you something. True, but perhaps not in the way you think. Betrayal is not always a dramatic thing, Charles. Sometimes it is small. Sometimes it is unintentional, but the greater truth is this. We must hold everyone we love loosely. We must not bind ourselves to people so tightly that when they disappoint us, and they will disappoint us, our entire world falls apart. That is the lesson I think she came to teach. The weeks turned into months. Amara continued her pregnancy, her belly growing larger, her body changing, but the warning lived in her mind like a constant whisper. She found herself watching everyone around her differently. She noticed every interaction, every conversation, every moment of hesitation. By month 4, she had begun to see betrayal everywhere. A casual comment from Diana became a potential insult. A business decision by David that differed from her opinion became a potential threat. James's working late became suspicious. Her intuition, once a strength, had become a prison. She was seeing threats in every shadow. The joy of her pregnancy, which should have been a beautiful time, had been tainted by fear and suspicion. And then, in month 5, something real happened, something that would begin to unfold the truth. Amara was cleaning James's study when she found a torn email printout, accidentally left on his desk. As she began to read, her heart seemed to stop. It was a conversation between James and her business partner, David. They were discussing a potential business deal, a very specific business deal, a deal with one of her major competitors. a deal that would directly harm a company. The language of the emails was careful, professional, but the intention was clear. James and David had been planning, behind her back, to use her company's proprietary information to secure a better deal for themselves. For months, while she had been trusting James with every detail of her business, he had been betraying her. With the one person she had trusted most professionally, Amara felt the room spin. The old woman's warning suddenly became devastatingly real. Someone she loved had indeed betrayed her, but the betrayal was even worse than she had imagined because it meant they had both lied to her, maintained false friendship and loyalty while secretly working against her. When James came home that evening, Amara was waiting for him. She held the email in her trembling hands. He saw it, and his face went white. For a moment he tried to lie, to deny it, to explain it away. But Amara's eyes filled with hurt and rage, and betrayal made him realize that there was no point. The truth had been exposed. How long? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. How long have you been doing this? James sat down, the weight of his deception finally crushing him. Since month 2, he admitted. David approached me with the idea. He said it would be better for our financial future, for our child's future.
I thought it was just business.
I didn't think of it as betraying you, but those words only made the betrayal deeper. He hadn't thought of it as wrong. He had justified it. He had rationalized it. He had lied directly to her face for months while she carried his child. Over the following days, the full extent of the betrayal came to light. David had been gathering information from James for months. Documents, strategies, client lists, everything that Amara had built through years of hard work and innovation. James had given it all away, not for money, but for a promise of a better position in David's company. He was planning to leave Amara's company and join David in a venture that would directly compete with her. And worse, he had sworn David to secrecy, knowing that if Amara discovered this, it would end everything: their business partnership, their marriage, their family. Amara felt something break inside her during this unraveling. She had built her entire sense of security on James's love and loyalty. She had believed in him absolutely, and all the while he had been systematically dismantling the foundation. What of their life together? She thought of the old woman's words. The walls will crumble. Amara didn't tell anyone except Mama Grace. She drove to her mother-in-law's small home and walked inside without knocking. Mama Grace took one look at her face and stood up from where she had been sitting. She didn't ask questions. She simply held Amara while the younger woman wept deep, anguished sobs that came from the deepest places of her being. When the tears finally subsided, Amara told her everything. And when she finished, Mama Grace was quiet for a long time. Then she said something that Amara would never forget. The old woman came not to curse you, child, but to prepare you. She knew this was coming. And she came so that when it happened, you would understand that you could survive it. You can lose your business. You can lose your marriage, but you will still be you. You will still be strong. You will still have worth. And perhaps this destruction is necessary so that you can build something better. Something based on truth instead of illusion. 2 weeks later, Amara went into labor. 7 months had passed almost exactly to the day that the old woman delivered her warning. James was beside her in the hospital, but the connection between them had fundamentally changed. The lie lived in every moment of their interaction. Amara was in the hospital room for 16 hours. The pain of childbirth was intense, overwhelming, all-consuming, but in the midst of that pain, something shifted. As she pushed through the final contractions, as the nurses encouraged her, as she felt her body doing the miraculous work it was designed to do, Amara experienced something that the betrayal hadn't been able to touch. She brought a new life into the world, a daughter, a perfect, beautiful, innocent daughter. And looking at that baby the life she had created, Amara understood something profound. The old woman had been right. With a child will come truth. Amara held her daughter and felt the weight of the moment. She looked into the baby's eyes, so new, so pure, untouched by the world's betrayals and disappointments. And she made a decision in that moment. She would not let her pain become her daughter's inheritance. She would not teach her daughter to be suspicious of love or cynical about loyalty. Instead, she would teach her to be wise. To love deeply but not attach her entire identity to others. To be strong enough to survive disappointment. To understand that people are flawed, including the people we love most, and that we can still love them while also protecting ourselves. She looked at James, who was watching her with the baby, his face full of conflicted emotions. "We need to talk," she said quietly. "Not tonight, but soon. We need to be honest about what comes next." 1 week later, at home with their newborn daughter, Amara and James had the conversation that would reshape their marriage. Amara didn't yell, she didn't rage. Instead, she spoke with a clarity that came from having felt the ground beneath her life completely shift. "I don't know if I can stay in this marriage," she said. "But before I decide, I need you to understand something. The old woman who came to the shower, her warning wasn't just about your betrayal. It was about preparing me to understand that I had built my entire sense of worth on external things. My business, my success, my possessions, and my marriage. I had wrapped my identity so tightly around you that when you betrayed me, I felt like I was dying. But holding our daughter, I realized something. I am more than my business. I am more than my success. I am more than you. And before I can rebuild, I need to know who I am apart from all of these external validations in the following weeks. Amara made the difficult decision to confront David and to take legal action. She hired lawyers. She secured her intellectual property. She filed paperwork that would prevent David from using her company's information. It was messy, it was painful, but it was necessary. James, realizing the gravity of his actions, cooperated fully with the legal process. He broke his confidentiality agreement with David. He provided documentation of their communications. He testified to what had happened. In the end, Amara's company was protected. David's business venture never launched, and James resigned from Amara's company, understanding that he could not work there anymore. The trust that had been the foundation of their professional relationship was irreparably broken. But in breaking, something real emerged. James began to understand the consequences of his actions, not because he had to, but because he chose to take responsibility. Accountability became the first step toward redemption. 4 months after their daughter Zenem, named in honor of the old woman who had delivered the warning, was born, Amara faced a crossroads. James had moved out. He was seeing a therapist, working to understand why he had made the choices he had made. He had a job at a different company, rebuilding his professional reputation. And he was involved in Zenab's life, visiting regularly, being a present father. But Amara still didn't know if she wanted to remain married to him. The betrayal had cut too deeply. Trust, once broken, is extraordinarily difficult to rebuild. She had spoken to Mama Grace about it many times, and one evening Mama Grace told her, love and trust are not the same thing. You can love someone without trusting them with your heart. You can choose to maintain connection with someone while also maintaining healthy boundaries. The old woman's warning was not that your husband would never betray you, but was that you should know it was possible and prepare yourself not to be. Destroyed by Diana came to see Amara 3 weeks after the legal proceedings had concluded. She arrived with flowers and an expression of deep shame. I was at the baby shower, Diana said. I heard what the old woman said, and I mocked her. I laughed. I dismissed her as crazy, and all the while my best friend was going through exactly what that old woman had warned about, and I didn't believe. I didn't support. I made light of something that turned out to be devastatingly true. Amara invited her in, and they talked. For hours, Diana confessed that she had suspected something wasn't right between James and David months earlier, but had convinced herself it was nothing. She had prioritized her friendship with both men over her loyalty to Amara. She had been a fair-weather friend, present during the party but absent when it mattered. I'm sorry, Diana said finally. I'm sorry for not being the friend you needed, and I'm sorry for doubting the old woman. She was wise, and we were fools. Amara brought baby Zainab to show Mama Grace. Her mother-in-law held the tiny baby and wept with joy. You named her Zainab, she asked. Amara nodded. I wanted to honor the old woman, not because her warning was pleasant, it wasn't, but because it was true, and because she cared enough about a stranger to speak truth even though she knew she would be mocked for it. That's love. That's wisdom. That's the kind of courage I want my daughter to learn. Mama Grace looked at her daughter-in-law with pride. Do you understand now what the old woman was really telling you? Amara thought for a moment. Yes, she said finally. She was telling me that I built my life on illusions, that I believed everyone I loved would act with perfect loyalty and honesty, that I made myself vulnerable by giving all of my trust to imperfect people, and that the way to be strong is not to stop loving, but to love while also remaining independent. To not attach my identity to anyone else's choices. Amara returned to her business 6 weeks after Zainab was born. She took maternity leave, but not a complete break. She was determined not to let the betrayal destroy the company she had built, and slowly, carefully, she rebuilt. She brought in new partners, people she had carefully vetted, people with integrity. She secured her intellectual property even more carefully. She diversified her client base so that she was not dependent on any single relationship, and she succeeded. Not in spite of the betrayal, but partly because of it. The crisis forced her to build a more resilient business structure. It forced her to be more careful about the people she trusted with sensitive information. It forced her to develop systems and processes that protected her company from internal and external threats. By month 8, her business was not just recovered, debt was stronger than it had been before the betrayal. 9 months after Zainab was born, Amara made her final decision about her marriage. She sat James down and spoke with the clarity that comes from having done deep inner work. I have decided to stay married to you, she said. But not because I have fully forgiven you, not because I trust you the way I used to. I'm staying because I believe in the person you are trying to become, because I think you are genuinely working on understanding why you made those choices, and because I believe our daughter deserves to have her father in her life in a meaningful way. But I need you to understand something. This marriage will never be what it was. That innocence is gone. What we build from here will be different, more careful, more conscious, more honest. We will rebuild from the rubble with our eyes open. 1 year and 3 weeks after the old woman's visit to the baby shower, Amara received an unexpected visitor. She was in her garden, the same garden where the shower had taken place, but now it looked different. She had replanted it with native African flowers. She had removed the ostentatious decorations. The space was beautiful, but in a more authentic way. And walking slowly up the path was an old woman. It took Amara a moment to recognize her. It was Zainab, the old woman who had delivered the warning. She looked exactly the same, impossibly ancient, weathered, but with those same penetrating eyes. Amara stood up slowly. She didn't feel fear. This time she felt gratitude. "You came back," Amara said. Zainab smiled, and for the first time Amara saw the deep kindness in that ancient face. "I told you I would come back, not in the warning, but in my heart. I knew I would come back when the lesson had been learned." "Who are you?" Amara asked. Are you a spirit? Are you real?" Zainab sat down on the bench that Amara had placed in the garden, and Amara sat beside her. "I am real," Zainab said. "I am a woman who has lived 88 years on this earth. But I am also something more. I am someone who has learned to listen to the voices that speak to us not with words, but with feelings, with intuition, with knowledge that comes from somewhere beyond the rational mind." A week before your baby shower, I had a dream. In the dream, I saw a young woman building her life on sand. I saw her surrounded by people she loved, but I also saw shadows that showed me this young woman would soon discover betrayal. And I was told in that dream that I must go and speak to this young woman. Not to curse her, but to prepare her. "But why didn't you just tell me it would be James?" Amara asked. "Why the riddle? Why the mystery?" Zainab was quiet for a moment. "Because if I had told you specifically who would betray you, you would have done one of two things. You would have either pushed him away and prevented the betrayal, or you would have obsessed over him, trying to prevent what you knew was coming. Neither path would have taught you the lesson you needed to learn. The lesson was not about James's betrayal specifically. The lesson was about understanding that betrayal is possible from anyone, and that understanding this does not mean we should stop loving or trusting. It means we should love and trust while maintaining healthy boundaries. We should give people chances but not give them unlimited chances. We should open our hearts but also guard them." The old woman then turned her attention to baby Zainab, who was playing innocently in the grass. "And this child," she said, "she is named after me, which means she will carry something of my spirit into the world. She will grow up hearing a story of how her mother was warned and how her mother chose to grow from that warning rather than be destroyed by it. And she will learn from her mother that it is possible to love without being naive, to trust without being gullible, to be strong without being hard, to be open without being foolish." The old woman reached out and touched baby Zainab's head gently. The child turned and looked at her, and for a moment, it seemed like there was recognition, an ancient recognition passing from the old woman to the child. Amara felt tears on her cheeks again, but these were different tears. These were tears of understanding, not tears of pain. Before she left, Zainab pressed something into Amara's hand. It was a small cloth bag, woven with traditional African patterns. "Open this only when you are ready to teach your daughter about the cost of wisdom," Zainab said. Amara wanted to ask what was inside, but she knew this old woman didn't offer answers easily. Instead, she said, "Thank you for coming, for warning me, for preparing me." Zainab smiled, and it was the smile of someone who had watched countless humans struggle and grow and learn from their mistakes. "You are welcome," she said. "And remember this, the greatest wealth is not in money or possessions. It is in knowing yourself deeply enough that no one else's choices can shake your foundation. It is in loving without losing yourself. It is in building on stone instead of sand." As Zainab stood to leave, Amara asked one final question. "Will I see you again?" The old woman walked back toward the guard entrance, moving with the same slow but purposeful pace she had used when arriving. "You are already seeing me," she said without turning around. "In every moment you make a choice to love wisely. In every time you set a boundary with someone you care about. In every moment you teach your daughter that strength comes not from never falling, but from knowing how to get up. I am with you always, because wisdom is always with those who choose to listen." And then she was gone. Amara watched the empty garden path where the old woman had disappeared, and she understood that she would probably never see Zainab again. But that didn't matter. The message had been delivered. The lesson had been learned, and the wisdom would continue forward through Amara and through her daughter. And through all the generations to come. It took Amara 3 months to open the bag that Zainab had given her. She kept it in a safe place, knowing that the right moment would come. Then one evening, when baby Zainab was nearly 18 months old and beginning to understand language, Amara sat with her daughter and opened the bag. Inside was a collection of items. A small shell representing resilience, a piece of clay representing the malleability of our lives, our ability to be reshaped, a coin representing value beyond monetary worth, and a written note, in handwriting, that seemed impossibly elegant for someone so ancient. The note read, "Dear Amara and little Zainab, trust in life, trust in growth, trust in your own strength. But do not be naive about the human heart. Love everyone, but hold no one so tightly that you cannot breathe if they leave. This is the wisdom of age. This is the wisdom of survival. May it serve you well. During this time, James had continued his own journey of healing. He had started therapy, genuinely engaging with understanding why he had betrayed Amara. He had come to understand that his own insecurity had driven him to seek validation from David. He had been afraid that he wasn't successful enough on his own, so he had tried to create an alternate path that would prove his worth. The betrayal came not from malice, but from profound insecurity and a misguided attempt to ensure his family's financial security. None of this excused what he had done, but understanding the root of his choices allowed him to begin to heal, and more importantly, it allowed him to stop repeating the pattern. When he looked at baby Zainab, he saw someone who depended on him not to be perfect, but to be honest and to keep trying to become a better version of himself. He became more present, more genuine, more connected to his family. 1 year and 11 months after the old woman's warning, Amara organized a small gathering in her garden. Not a party, exactly, but a gathering. She invited Mama Grace and James and even Diana, who had genuinely changed after the scandal and was trying to rebuild a friendship with Amara. Diana had apologized sincerely and had proven her commitment to being a better friend through consistent, genuine effort over many months. Even David was invited, though he stayed only briefly. He had lost his business, suffered legal consequences, and was working to rebuild his professional reputation. He had written Amara an apology letter, not expecting forgiveness but offering accountability. Amara had accepted his apology without fully forgiving him. She was learning that these two things could exist simultaneously. The gathering was not about celebrating what had happened, but about honoring the wisdom that had come from it. Mama Grace brought food, James helped set up, Diana brought wine, and baby Zainab, now nearly 2 years old, played innocently among the adults who loved her. During the gathering, Mama Grace stood and raised her glass. 2 years ago, an old woman came to our celebration and said something that we all mocked. We didn't understand. We couldn't understand because we were still living in the illusion that life is simple, that love is uncomplicated, that people are either good or bad. But life is more complex than that. People are capable of both great love and great betrayal, and the truly wise person is not the one who never falls, but the one who falls and learns and gets back up and keeps trying. Amara has done this, and in doing it, she has taught all of us something valuable. She looked at each person present, to Amara, to her wisdom, to her strength, and to all of us who have been blessed to learn from her journey. Everyone raised their glasses, and for a moment, the gathering felt sacred. This was not the world of perfect parties and perfect lives that Amara had inhabited before. This was the world of real people, doing real work, trying to be better. That night, after everyone had left, Amara sat alone in the garden with baby Zainab, who was sleeping in her lap. She looked up at the stars and thought about the past 2 years, the shock of the warning, the fear of not knowing who would betray her, the devastation of discovering the betrayal, the long journey of processing her pain, setting boundaries, taking legal action, and slowly rebuilding her marriage and her life. She thought about how the worst thing that could have happened had actually been the best thing, because it had forced her to examine everything she had built and rebuilt it on a more solid foundation. She thought about how the old woman's warning, which had seemed like a curse at the time, was actually the greatest gift she could have received. Not the gift of knowing the future, but the gift of being prepared for it. The gift of understanding that wisdom is not about avoiding pain, but about knowing how to transform pain into growth. As baby Zainab grew into a toddler and then into a young girl, Amara told her the story repeatedly, not as a scary story to make her afraid of people, but as a story about the importance of wisdom, the value of listening to intuition, and the power of love combined with healthy boundaries. By the time Zainab was 10 years old, she understood the full narrative. Her mother had been warned by a mysterious old woman, how the warning had come true, and how her mother had used that revelation to become stronger and wiser. But more importantly, Zainab understood her mother's core message. People will sometimes let us down. People we love, people we trust, but we can still love them. We just have to do it wisely, without losing ourselves in the process. By the time young Zainab was a teenager, her mother's business had become a model of ethical success. Amara had built something that was profitable but also sustainable. She had built a team of people she trusted, not naively, but with clear boundaries and accountability structures in place. She had become an advisor to other entrepreneurs about how to build businesses that were resilient against internal betrayal. She was invited to speak at conferences about the importance of ethical business practices and healthy boundaries in leadership. She had taken her pain and transformed it into something that could help others. The business that had almost been destroyed by her husband and her business partners, Patrol, had actually become stronger and more successful because of the systems and structures she had implemented after the crisis. Jamesy, too, had found his own path of redemption. He had started his own business, a consulting firm that helped small businesses with ethical leadership practices. In a way, he was teaching others what he had learned from his own failure. He was no longer trying to prove his worth through success or validation from others. He had integrated humility into his identity. He and Amara's marriage, while never returning to its original form, had become something perhaps more valuably a real partnership between two people who knew each other's darkness and chose to stay anyway. They had created the foundation of their marriage on honesty rather than illusion. And their daughter Zainab had watched and learned what real love looked like. Not the fairy tale version that ends in perfect happiness, with the adult version that involves commitment despite difficulty, forgiveness without naivete, and love that grows from understanding rather than from fantasy. When Mama Grace passed away at the age of 82, she left behind a legacy of wisdom. In her will, she left Amara a letter. In it, she wrote about how she had known from the moment she met Zainab at the garden gate that something significant was about to happen. She wrote about how she had recognized the old woman as someone sent by the universe to teach Amara a lesson that no normal circumstance could have taught. She wrote, "The old woman came because you needed to be broken in order to be rebuilt stronger. I knew this. The ancestors knew this. And now you know this too. Pass this wisdom to your daughter. Tell her that the greatest strength comes not from never falling, but from knowing how to get back up. Tell her that love is a choice we make every day, not a feeling that protects us from being hurt. Tell her that the wise woman is the one who loves fully but holds loosely." When young Zainab was 16 years old, she told her mother that she wanted to become a counselor. She wanted to work with people who had experienced betrayal and trauma. She wanted to help them understand, as her mother had learned, that betrayal doesn't have to destroy us, it can teach us. Her mother listened and understood immediately where this calling had come from. It had been planted in her when she was a newborn, blessed by an old woman who had whispered the transmission of wisdom into her spirit. Zainab had grown up with the story of her mother's journey, and she wanted to dedicate her life to helping others transform their pain into wisdom. She would become, in a sense, a continuation of the work that Zainab, the old woman, had begun. She would be a modern-day messenger, helping people understand that wisdom is not about avoiding pain, but about integrating it into your character, in a way that makes you stronger years later. When Zainab became a professional counselor, she would often tell her clients the story of her mother and the old woman who had delivered the warning. She would tell them that what seemed like a curse at the time was actually a blessing. She would tell them that the universe sometimes sends us difficult lessons wrapped in difficult packages. And she would tell them what her mother had learned and what her mother had taught her, that we are stronger than our circumstances, that we can love without losing ourselves, that we can forgive without erasing the fact that we were hurt, that we can move forward without pretending the past didn't happen, and that the deepest wisdom comes not from avoiding pain, but from transforming pain into understanding, compassion, and strength. When Amara was 45 years old, she wrote what it was called The Old Woman's Warning: How Betrayal Taught Me Wisdom. In the book, she told the complete story of the old woman's visit, the betrayal that followed, the crisis it created, and the healing journey that came after. She wrote about her marriage, and how it had transformed from something built on illusion to something built on truth. She wrote about her business and how the system she created after the crisis had made it stronger. She wrote about her daughter and how she hoped to pass on the wisdom that had been so painfully earned. And she wrote about Zainab, the old woman. Now she believed that this ancient woman had been sent as a kind of angel not to curse her, but to prepare her for a journey that would ultimately make her more fully human, more compassionate, more wise. When Amara's book was published, it became unexpectedly popular. Thousands of people read it and found themselves reflected in her story. People who had experienced betrayal, people who were struggling with trust issues, people who had felt broken by circumstances and were looking for a way to transform that brokenness into wisdom. Amara was invited to speak at book tours, at conferences, at therapeutic seminars. She became a voice for a particular kind of healing, not the healing that pretends the wound never happened, but the healing that integrates the wound into a narrative of growth. Her book became a bestseller. Her story became a teaching tool. And most importantly, her journey became evidence that transformation is possible, that we can take the worst things that happen to us and transform them into the best things about us. 10 years after the old woman's final visit to the garden, Amara returned to the exact spot where the warning had been delivered. She brought her daughter Zainab with her, now a grown woman and a successful counselor. They stood together in the garden, and Amara recounted the story, the shock of the old woman's arrival, the mocking laughter, the fear that followed, the revelation of betrayal, and the long journey of healing. "Do you regret it?" Zainab asked her mother. Amara was quiet for a moment, thinking about all the pain, all the struggle, all the work it had taken to rebuild her life and her marriage. Then she shook her head. "No," she said. "I regret the betrayal, but I don't regret what I became because of it. The woman I am now is worth what I had to go through to become her in that garden moment." Amara told her daughter something she had never told her before. "Zainab, I found another letter after the old woman left that final time. It was hidden in the garden, in the place where she had sat with me. I opened it, but I needed many years to understand what it said. Amara pulled out a piece of paper, aged and fragile, from her pocket. It read, "Dear Amara, by the time you read this, you will have felt the sting of betrayal. You will have questioned whether it was worth the love you gave. You will have wondered if I cursed you or blessed you. But now I tell you the truth. I did not curse you. The universe cursed you with free will, with vulnerability, with the capacity to be hurt. But I blessed you with the knowledge that these curses are also the greatest gifts. Because without the capacity to be hurt, you could not have the capacity to love deeply. Without free will, you could not choose to stay. Without vulnerability, you could not grow. I am old now and I will soon be gone from this world, but you will live on, and you will teach. And you will change the world by showing people that we do not have to be destroyed by our pain. We can be refined by it. You will be a teacher. You will be a healer. You will be a light." Zainab held her mother, both of them crying, in that garden where everything had changed, and Zainab said something that her mother would carry with her for the rest of her life. "Mom, you know what I realized? The old woman didn't just come to warn you. She came to give you faith. She came to tell you that even when everything falls apart, you will be okay. Even when people you love betray you, you will survive it. Even when your perfect life crumbles, something better will be built from the rubble. She came to give you proof, before you needed it, that you are strong enough to handle what life will bring." Amara looked at her daughter with wonder. This young woman had integrated a lifetime of wisdom in her own lifetime. She had grown up with a story and extracted the deepest meaning from it. She had understood something that had taken her mother decades to understand. In the final chapters of Amara's book, she dedicated pages to James and to Mama Grace. She wrote about how James's betrayal, whilst painful, had ultimately made their marriage stronger and more real. She wrote about how his willingness to take responsibility and to work on becoming better had transformed something that could have been a permanent wound into a catalyst for growth. And she wrote about Mama Grace, her steady presence, her quiet wisdom, her consistent belief in the deeper truth of what was happening when everyone else was mocking the old woman's warning. She wrote, "James learned that the measure of a person is not in never making mistakes, but in taking responsibility for those mistakes and committing to not repeat them." Mama Grace lived a truth that most of us never learn. That wisdom is not about knowing the future, but about trusting that, whatever comes, we will find a way to transform it into growth. When Zainab was ready to start her own family, she told her partner, a kind, honest man named Michael, the complete story of her birth, her name, and the old woman's warning. She told him that she wanted to name their first daughter Zainab if it was a girl, continuing the lineage of wisdom and strength. She explained that her family was not a family built on illusions, but on truth, on the understanding that love is not about never falling, but about knowing how to get up together. When their daughter was born, she was indeed a girl, and when Zainab held her daughter for the first time, she felt the presence of all the women who had come before her, her mother-in-law's mother, Mama Grace, and the ancient woman Zainab who had started it all by delivering her warning. She understood, in that moment of holding her own daughter, that she was part of a chain of women who understood something profound about the nature of love and strength. When Amara was 50 years old, she was invited to speak at a conference about resilience and transformation, and in her speech, she told the complete story of the old woman's warning, the betrayal, the crisis, and the healing. When she finished, she looked out at the audience, hundreds of people, many of them with tears on their faces, and she said this, "I don't know if the woman who came to my baby shower was a real person, or if she was a manifestation of my own deepest wisdom. I don't know if she was sent by the universe, or if she was sent by my own soul's desire to grow. But I know this. Sometimes the most painful things that happen to us are actually the greatest gifts. Sometimes the breaking apart is necessary for something stronger to be built. And sometimes we need to be destroyed in order to become who we are truly meant to be. Don't run from your pain. Don't try to avoid it. Instead, ask yourself, what is this trying to teach me? How can I transform this into wisdom? And then trust that you are strong enough to do the transformation." Years later, when Amara was doing research for her second book, she hired a private investigator to try to find information about the old woman named Zainab. What the investigator found: nothing. No records of anyone by that name in the village beyond her property. No one who remembered an ancient woman fitting her description. It was as if Zainab had never existed in the material world at all. Amara found this not disturbing but affirming, because whether the old woman was real or whether she was the manifestation of Amara's own inner wisdom, the wisdom she had delivered was absolutely real. The message had been absolutely true, and the transformation that had occurred was absolutely genuine. Amara came to accept that the greatest mysteries of life are not meant to be solved, but to be lived with. She stopped searching for who Zainab was, and instead focused on becoming the woman that Zainab had called her to be. When Amara was 65 years old, she organized one final gathering in her garden. This time, it was not a small party, but a celebration of her life and her work. Guests included James, who had become her partner in life even though their marriage had transformed into something that transcended the traditional definition. Her daughter Zainab, now a celebrated therapist and author in her own right. Her granddaughter, little Zainab, now 7 years old and showing all the signs of inheriting her family's wisdom and strength. Mama Grace's great, carrying forward the legacy of her quiet strength. Friends and colleagues whose lives had been touched by Amara's story and her teaching. And as the sun set over the garden, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose and violet, Amara stood in the center of her beloved space and thought about the journey that had brought her here. She thought about the old woman who had arrived unannounced and uninvited, and who had given her the greatest gift of her life, with the opportunity to become fully human, fully alive, fully strong. And she whispered a prayer of gratitude to the universe, to all the forces seen and unseen that had guided her transformation. The story that had begun in fear had ended in wisdom. The warning that had seemed like a curse had become the greatest blessing of all. This is the story of Amara, but it is also your story, because all of us have moments when we believe we have built something that cannot be shaken. All of us have people we trust so completely that we cannot imagine them betraying us. All of us have illusions that seem unshakable until something comes along and shatters them. And all of us have the choice, in those moments of shattering, to either collapse or to transform. The old woman's warning was not unique to Amara in some form or another. Wisdom is constantly trying to reach us through our intuition, through people we respect, through experiences that teach us hard lessons. The question is, will we listen? Will we prepare ourselves not by becoming cynical or closed-hearted, but by becoming wise? Will we learn to love deeply while also protecting ourselves? Will we understand that the greatest strength is not in never falling, but in knowing how to get back up? So, if you are watching this story, and you are currently in pain, if you are facing betrayal, if your world is crumbling, if everything you believed in has been shattered, hear this message: you will survive. More than survive, you will grow. More than grow, you will transform into something stronger and more beautiful than you were before. The pain you are feeling right now is not the end of your story. It is the beginning. The universe is inviting you to become more fully human, more deeply wise, more genuinely strong. Listen to the warnings that come your way. Honor the elder voices that speak truth. And when you are ready, take your own hard-won wisdom and share it with others. Because the greatest gift we can offer is not our success or our perfect lives. The greatest gift we can offer is our transformed pain, because it shows others that transformation is possible. You are not defined by your betrayals. You are defined by what you do with your betrayals. You are not destroyed by your pain. You are refined by it. And now go forward, knowing that you are strong enough, wise enough, and brave enough to transform whatever comes. The end.